If you're wondering what roux is and how to make it, you're in the right place. Roux is a common thickening and emulsifying agent that is used to thicken so many sauces, and it's also great for binding things that don't normally dissolve together, like oil and water or oil and vinegar. Now, one of the greatest parts about roux is that it's super easy to make. All you need are two ingredients, just butter and flour. But also you can freeze roux and store it in the freezer in ice cube trays and take out just as much as you need whenever you're making a new dish. I'm John Clark with Bracanio BQ. Besides the butter and flour, the only things you need to be able to cook roux are a skillet and either a spatula or a whisk. Now, if you're talking to a French chef, they'll tell you that roux comes in three varieties: light, blonde, and brown. But if you've ever made Cajun food or talked to someone from Louisiana, you also know that it comes in a dark brown variety as well. The only difference between making these different shades of roux is how long you cook them. The only difference in the result is that the darker the roux, the stronger the flavors it will create. And also, as it cooks longer, it won't be as powerful of a thickening agent. So let's get started. To start with, use a scale and measure out equal weights of butter or oil and flour. Regardless of what type of oil you're using, you want equal weights. If you don't have a scale, go ahead and do about twice the volume of flour to the volume of oil. So if you do 2 tablespoons of butter, then you would do 4 tablespoons of flour as an approximation. But the scale really is the best method. When you're done, put the oil or butter in the pan and start heating over medium-low. To start with, I'm bringing my oil over medium-low heat here. And when it starts to bubble, I can test if it's ready to put the flour in by throwing a pinch in and seeing if it starts to crackle. If it doesn't start to crackle, like it is just now, actually, then that's when I know it's time to add the rest of the flour in. I'm making 2 varieties today, a light sauce for some bechamel I'm making, as well as one I'm going to take to a dark brown variety to demonstrate that process. So a light roux is perfect for any type of white sauces or bechamel sauces, cream or cheese sauces like Alfredo, or for using a mac and cheese. And now you can see that really the graininess has started to dissipate out of here. It's starting to foam and bubble. That means that this light roux is done right here. I can take this out, let it cool, and use it for a sauce. And it just barely has a nutty smell. The raw flour smell is gone. So I'll remove that from the heat. And this is the roux that I'll be taking to a darker color. Now, as you can see here, this roux has reached what we call the blonde roux stage. You can see it flows a little more than the light roux I've made here, which still has a pasty consistency. This is becoming to flow almost. And I can tell you that this blonde roux is starting to pick up a stronger nutty aroma. So it took right around 6 minutes to reach, 6.5 or so minutes to reach this stage. And I'll need to let it keep on cooking to reach a brown roux. And at this point, I really want to make sure I continue stirring, and I need to make sure the heat does not get too high. When you start getting to a brown roux, it is quite easy for it to start burning. So I'm not quite at the brown roux stage yet, but you can really see the difference in color between these 2 roux at this point. This is past the blonde for certain at this point. It's not quite to the stage of a brown roux. And now we've reached about 10 minutes, between 10 and 11 minutes into the cook, and I've got a nice brown roux here. You can see the color is very different. Now I got the heat just a little too high, it started to smoke, so I need to remove it from the heat for a moment. So if your roux does start to smoke just a little bit, take it off the heat, continue stirring it, and make sure that you leave it off the heat until the smoke dissipates. If it gets too smoky and it burns, you'll see a really quick change in color. That means you burnt it and you're going to have to start over. There's no way to save that. But if you catch the smoke really early, you can still salvage it before it burns. And as you can see, as it cooks more and more, it gets much more runny. The brown roux would be used in dishes or sauces like the Espagnole mother sauce from France, or for other dark gravies, or you can use brown and dark brown roux for Creole and Cajun dishes like jambalaya and gumbo. Especially the dark brown is typically used for those types of dishes. And when you're going for that dark brown roux, you have to really watch the smoke point again. You can incrementally turn up your temperature until it smokes, take it off the heat, and let it cool back down. Put it back on and turn the temperature down just a bit from where you had it to make sure that it doesn't burn. So one of the biggest takeaways you should have from this video is that roux requires some constant attention, especially when going for a brown or a dark brown variety, because if you let it sit over the heat, it will burn. Making a brown or dark brown roux out of butter rather than avocado oil is going to require significantly more time because you cannot cook it at quite as high a temperature. I've used butter in this example so that I could show how to take care of it if it does start to smoke to prevent the burning. But typically, I would use avocado oil if I was making this type of roux because it goes a lot faster. And given that you have to stir it constantly, the avocado oil or vegetable oils will require a lot less work. Before I get to the final 4 tips about cooking roux, just want to take a moment and ask that if you're finding this information useful and you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You'll get notified every time there's a new video in this playlist. I do have a few more tips here while I finish up cooking this dark brown roux. And of course, continue stirring. But you want to make sure that you don't add salt or pepper to your roux, because especially if you're freezing it and using it for later, you want to make sure that you have the ability to season whatever sauce you're using without having to worry about over seasoning if you forget how much salt or pepper you put in the roux itself. Also, pepper can burn, and it can make your roux burn faster too if you use pepper. Now, in most cases, you're going to want to make sure that you let the roux cool down for at least a few minutes off the heat before using it. If you put the roux into a liquid or liquid over the roux, then remember this roux is way hotter than a water-based liquid and it could boil over. If you do plan to freeze and store your roux for later, make sure you let it cool completely in the fridge and then divvy it up into an ice cube tray before you stick it in the freezer. And finally, if you've let your roux cool down after just making it, or if you're taking it out of the freezer, all you need to do is stir it into your sauce and continue stirring that sauce for several minutes because it can take a while to thicken up. I've been continuously stirring this brown roux for a little over 20 minutes now, and it's right at the cusp of achieving that dark brown color. And as you can see, it's very runny, and we can compare here to a light roux, the very first stage, and we can see the stark contrast. I'm John Clark with Pequeño BQ. Thanks for joining me. I hope you learned everything you need to know about making roux in this video. I'm going to be using this light roux for a really awesome chipotle and shiitake mushroom flavored bechamel sauce in the next video in this series. So make sure to hit the bell and the subscription button to get notified when those come out.